Ed Luce mentioned Russia and Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who ended his hunger strike just recently. And your latest piece in The Atlantic is entitled "Navalny Has a Lesson for the World." The Russian opposition leader is showing what courage means. And you write in part this: when Alexei Navalny boarded a plane to Moscow on January 17th, he turned his life into a metaphor. He knew it, his wife knew it, and everyone else on the plane knew it. So did the millions of people who had watched his documentary videos, who had seen the witty interviews he did on the plane, who have since joined the demonstrations in his name. So did the leaders of Russia, including the country's dictator and president, Vladimir Putin. This, Navalny was telling all of them, is what courage looks like. He has already showed his compatriots that it is possible to live an honest life in a dishonest political system. It's an invitation for others to follow. Dictatorships survive because most people are not willing to pay that high a price. And I'll just read also, he wrote a note to Yevgenia Albats, a Russian journalist, close friend, saying everything will be all right. And even if it isn't, we'll have the consolation of having lived honest lives. His life is a metaphor. Can you explain the impact that Navalny has had on Vladimir Putin's leadership directly?
It's important to understand that the reason why Vladimir Putin rules Russia, one of the most important reasons, is that he has successfully created a sense of apathy among people. Among the Russians. You know, he gives people the feeling that there is no alternative to himself. He allows no one to emerge who has any different ideas, who has any different way of running the country. He presents himself at the center of politics. He shows himself in conflict with foreign countries. I don't think Americans realize the degree to which anti-American propaganda now runs constantly on Russian television, as well as anti-European propaganda. He creates the feeling that all around us, that everything is dangerous, and only I can save Russia from all of these terrible challenges from the outside world. And by showing that that's not true, by showing that there can be an alternative, and particularly by putting together these extraordinary investigative projects, videos, exposés of Putin's corruption, of the corruption of the people around him, Navalny shows that there could be an alternative. We could live differently. We could have values. And this is something that Putin increasingly cannot tolerate. You know, for the first few years, for the first decade, really, that he was in power, he won support more or less by doing a deal with Russians, saying, you know, okay, I'm corrupt, I'm stealing, but at least your living standards are going up. That's now not true anymore. Russian living standards are not going up. And so instead what he says, you know, I offer you conflict and triumph and glory. And Navalny is showing there is a different way of living, there's a different way of being, we could have a different kind of government. And that's something that Putin simply can no longer tolerate, that any kind of opposition at all.
Ed, could you explain to our viewers why it is that of all the things Navalny has done, and Anne was talking about the corruption, the pictures of his massive estates and of his vast wealth seem to have stung Putin the most, and maybe inspiring some of Navalny's leaders to get out in the streets at the risk of their own lives.
Yeah, I mean, those video images of this palace that's been built on the Black Sea, allegedly Putin's palace, with extraordinary sort of luxuries. Also, the list that Navalny and his people have been keeping of oligarchs around Putin, close to Putin, and the kinds of storied wealth that they're salting away outside of Russia, with our connivance, by the way. This isn't possible without London, without New York, without the Caribbean offshore shelters and all the sort of shell company games that we facilitate. That's clearly the route to Russian anger. The idea that they're being looted, and that the people looting them around Putin, and including Putin, are living extraordinary lives, based on stolen Russian assets. And I think that's, what probably strikes the rawest nerve with Putin. It does also, I think, give the Biden administration a real opportunity. You don't need to move troops up to the Russian border. You don't need to get a doubling of NATO spending. You don't need a military response. If you can just expose through transparency the ill-gotten gains to the Russian people and to the world of the Russian elites by having transparency in terms of our financial systems, requiring the beneficial owners of those apartments in the Trump Tower or wherever it might be, the names to be published. Another Panama Papers, if you remember the Panama Papers. These kinds of anti-kleptocratic weapons would be very, very powerful against Putin.
And Jonathan Lemire, Russia obviously has been on the front pages of our papers over the past 4 years. Vladimir Putin's interference in American elections has been almost a singular focus of the media and of many of Donald Trump's opponents over the past 4 years. Where is the Biden administration right now in relation to the relationship with Vladimir Putin, with Russia, and where they want it to go over the next several years? I'm sure they were pleased to see a de-escalation along the Ukrainian border.
Yeah, they were very heartened by that, Joe. The relationship with Russia has been an early significant focus of the Biden administration. The president has talked to President Putin twice now already on the phone. The START deal, the nuclear arms deal, was extended. That treaty was extended. That was seen as a real important diplomatic victory benefiting both nations early on. And they've been able to supply pressure, some of it subtle, some of it far less, on Putin, threatening with sanctions and leaning into, frankly, a warning about Navalny. We heard National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan the other day suggest bluntly there would be, quote, consequences if Navalny were to die. That Navalny's condition is improving, that was greeted as good news. That the troops were moved off of the border, at least reduced, good news. And Putin remains a focus of what will be the president's first foreign trip. He announced on Friday that he is, even in this pandemic world, making his first trip overseas. But it's important here to note how this will work. He's going to go in June to the UK for a meeting of the G7, the world's largest economies, and then to Brussels, to NATO, for the annual meeting there, where he is expected to really emphasize the U.S.'s support, unequivocal support for that long-standing Western alliance, one that President Trump, when he was in office, tried to undermine, had to be talked out of pulling the United States out of that organization. We're going to hear the exact opposite from President Biden when he goes there in June, pledging complete support. And only after he does that, there's talk of a third stop, which may be the Putin summit. Now, that's not locked in yet. That summit may not happen. It may fall to later in the year. But there is a chance that it will be then, as part of the president's first trip, which carries symbolic weight of the importance of this relationship. But again, only coming on the heels after NATO, after President Biden reassures allies, the United States is back, we're not going anywhere. This organization, built as a bulwark to Russia, it still will remain that way, that we're going to stand tough to Putin and encourage the protests, this movement we're seeing led by Navalny.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.